Hi everybody. So this is the finalization of the rear spar for the left wing. So when we left off, I was talking about the inboard aileron hinge bracket. So the two pieces of that actually make up the main bracket are easy to rivet together, and you'll use, well, I use all flush head rivets for that. There were some dome head rivets that are supposed to go nearer to the spar side, but to make sure the aileron didn't rub, I changed those over to flat heads and just did a little countersinking. Vans was perfectly okay with that. But you still have to rivet on the actual interior side. And now I'm going to show you some pictures here. Here you see you can actually see the pieces of metal that bookend the hinge, and you see how thick they are. And getting that in place, my squeezer just possibly couldn't get around it. So had to wind up using a rivet gun and a vise. Plus it's interesting because that bracket actually goes right around where the aileron attached bracket, or where the push rod comes in. So there's a hole in the spar, so you have to have a doubler, and you really need to have a lot of support for that bracket there. So thus the reason for all the heavy metal. And oh, just a real quick follow-up, here's actually a picture of the bottom side of that bracket. Now, here I am. First thing you do is you actually rivet on, and I didn't actually need to Cleco it to the ribs yet, but I did it anyway. You rivet on the doublers and the inboard attach aileron bracket. So you do those first. After those are done, then you Cleco them to the ribs, and then you rivet on the ribs. So interestingly, I just did it while it was Cleco to the ribs anyway. I didn't have any problems. I did have to use both yokes for the squeezer. The main, I always call it snub nose. It's not technically a snub nose, just a standard 3-inch squeezer. So that one will get 3 rows of the rivets around one side. To get the other 2 on the top side, you have to use the longeron yoke. You need to have a longeron yoke, or you'll wind up having to do it with a rivet gun. Of course, if you have the longeron yoke on the entire time, you could technically do it all with that one, but I didn't know that. Actually, no, that's not true, because there were 2 rivets that neither yoke worked with, and I needed to go back and do with a rivet gun. And of course, those were rivets that were around, that were in the ribs. So, as you can imagine, trying to get the squeezer, so the 4 ribs on the inside, which are the ones closest to the camera right there, that's for the wing walk. That's why they're so close together. When you start doing the top skins, you'll notice that there's big doubler plates that go on top of it. Now, that's where people walk up on the wing to get into the cockpit. So getting your squeezer in between those can be difficult. The squeezer itself fits okay, but it's having to drag the hose in there with it, depending on what sort of swivel joint you have set up for the airline. You have to give it a lot of slack, and then it winds up limiting its movements, so it can be a little messy. And at the same time, you also have to rivet on the doublers on the inboard side. So you actually do that when you do the regular doublers as well, but you don't do the ribs. So you have to leave out the rows with the ribs first, then go back and do the ribs. And you'll notice that those, like especially the 420s, the 470s that you use on the big doublers down there, you use a length that's 6. And when you look on the plans, even where there's ribs, it says a 6. So it's like, that's interesting. I'm adding the thickness of a rib, but I'm not adding any thickness to the rivet. So the rivets that Vans calls out are a little long. And I mean by, less than a 1/16 of an inch. But not quite a 32nd of an inch, right? Oh, wait. Hold on. Yep. Here he is. I knew I'd left this in full speed. So here I am. I'm listening to some. I'm not going to say who, but let's just say that I was heading for a heartbreak. and thus the grimacing. Anyway, enough of that silliness. So yeah, the rivets are called out are a little bit long, and they have more than enough material to get through the extra rivet itself. So anyway, once you're done riveting, that's pretty much it, and then you move on to the skins. See you soon.